And hello again, YouTube. This is Stampede Valkyrie again. A continuation of my videos in regards to working on vintage lights. I figured I'd graduate on from the aerodynamic, as the last two videos I made were, and let's focus on a new light that I'm working on. This is the actual Code 3 PSC, Public Safety Equipment, model 2100, I believe is what it was called, SD bar. It's either 21 or 2200 if you look at the literature. Anyway, what this is the second reiteration or second revision of the SD bar. What you're looking at is a complete bar, obviously minus some bulbs, and then obviously no domes. You can actually see the interior pieces of it. However, what I wanted to talk about here is, as I'm working on this, as this is the next project I'm working on, is just give you guys some pointers as to what to look for and how this bar is built, so the next person that runs into this can come and go, hey, look, somebody knows what's going on here. So let's talk about this bar in particular. This is a pretty basic sealed beam bar. Again, like I said, this is a second reiteration of the Code 3 SD bar. The first one, or the older generation of SD bars, had different lamp holders. The lamp holders on here are very similar to the XD, or not XD, the XL 9000 series light bars. As you can see by the round lamp holders, so on and so forth. These are the same as the XL series lamp holders for the sealed beam bars. The later version of this bar did not have sealed beams. It actually had the freeform or independent rotators, which is also found on the XL 5000 type bars. But that's neither here nor there. It's kind of cold out here for me today, so I'll try to keep this as short as possible. Some things worth talking about with this bar is the first point of the most common thing or failure on these bars. And I'll point that out here very shortly. Each of these bars were independent. They were not synchronized. And what that meant was, prior to what a lot of people think, is that the Twin Sonic bar, which is almost identical to this except for the interior or the internal guts, Twin Sonic bars were synchronized. You had a motor, you had a gearbox, the chain going over, and the lights never changed. They basically would, as soon as you sync them, they would stay the same. These bars did not. They're independent, and each side actually is independent of the other side, and how it works is pretty simple. So you've got your motor here, gearbox here. In turn, gearbox spins a, if you want to call it a drive belt, which you can see down here on the bottom. That drive belt then times over to the first rotator and then to the second rotator, and that's what actually spins the unit. So unlike a metal chain, which is found on the Twin Sonics and other bars that Federal like, this one actually used more of a timing belt, or a rubber belt, if you want to call it that. The other side, as you can see, is set up the exact same way. Your motor, your gearbox, the belt itself, and then the lights that are connected to that belt. The belt is the most common point of failure when it comes to these lights, and the reason for that is age. As the belt ages and as it dries out, the belt needs to be replaced. Well, the nice thing is the belts aren't hard to find. A little bit of looking around, you can actually find them on Amazon of all places. I'll see if I can get you a model number somewhere in this vid. I know that's where I picked up a couple of mine. It is a fairly common part, or at least a common timing belt part. So it's not impossible to find, it's fairly easy to locate. Some other things worth talking about, and I will actually take the speaker grill off so you can actually see this just in its most bare forms. So, just took the speaker grill off. We're looking at the back of the bar. Front of the bar, you can see the V-mirror. The V-mirror actually faces front. The V-mirror is blocking the actual view of the motor from the front of the bar, but also sends flashes out to the front of the bar. On the back of the bar, as you can see, there is no backwards facing V-mirror, which is kind of interesting considering the XL 9000 actually did a V-mirror, which allowed a front and rear facing V-mirror. It's a little bit different. I wonder if that would fit. I may have to experiment. I have some of those XL 9000 V-mirrors that are diamond mirrors that actually fit over these motors, and I'd like to see if they do fit, and if the domes would fit over them. That would be kind of interesting. So, barest form of the bar is what we've got right now. Power lead is actually over here. As you can see, I'm moving it around. Power lead comes up into the bar, comes over here, and then splits off. You can see you've got a wiring block here, and then going from there. There is another wiring block that it travels under. It's kind of hard to see. I'll see if I can point it out, if I can get that on camera. It's right near the blue wires, which are your speaker wires here. So these are your speaker wires if you were going to put a speaker in here. But there's another power lead right there, a little bit, maybe hard to see. That's actually coming off this initial block right here, as you can see the wires that come up. So that's going to traverse under the bar. You can see the other side of it here, over to this wiring block, which then in turn feeds both the motor and then the lamps themselves. The lamps actually connect as well, so that way there's both power and what you would call lighting going on at the same time, or lamp lighting. So, what else to talk about? Well, I guess the domes, I guess, is a good thing to talk about. Again, this was Code 3's version of the Twin Sonic bar. Again, second revision of this bar, as I said before. The Twin Sonic bar and the Code 3 SD looked almost identical. Externally, there was very, very few ways to tell them apart, other than their branding, and the fact that if you knew what a Code 3 SD bar looked like and how the rotators worked, you could identify it pretty quickly. Getting back to those rotators, you guys happen to luck out, because I have some of them. I do this enough that I hold on to the parts I take when I'm actually working on a bar. So that's an XL9000 rotator, just as an example of one that's out, and kind of give you an idea how it works. If you flip the rotator around upside down, you can see there's the part that the belt grabs, the mounting part for the bar itself, and then obviously how the bulbs mount, so on and so forth. One of the really neat things you can do with these bars is actually add another set of lamp holders right here on the open spot to turn this into a three lamp assembly, which is kind of interesting because I might actually do that on this one. I might actually steal some lamp assemblies off some other spare parts and actually throw 3 lamps in here and give it more of a flash. So there's your I guess that would be your 90-degree lamp holder right there. 2 lamps and then a blank. You can actually turn that into 3. There was also the 180 lamp holders, which, bear with me a moment. All right there, and again, this is not from an SD bar. This is actually parts from an XL9000, and as you can see, and this is what I mean, these rotators here are the same as what's found in the SD bar. And I believe, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe 1978-79 was when they transitioned from the first generation SD bar, which were kind of round, and the lamps were kind of held in place like they do on the growth beacons, to the XL9000 series lamp holders, probably due to cost reasons. They could share the parts between the XL and the SD bar. Yeah, and last but not least, while I've got it here too, I'm looking down, the belt. So there's your timing belt. Kind of hard to get a good picture of it when I'm holding it with one hand, but that's a spare timing belt. So if you look at it, this is the belt. Again, like black truck, black belt's not going to work. That's the belt which in turn drives everything else. And you can see that same belt sitting in here as it loops its way around to the different things. And as you can also see, the underside as to where the belt actually grabs, which is underneath there. So that's where it grabs to spin the rotators. The other thing that's worth noting, while I've got it, you have to bear with me a moment, I'm kind of doing this on the fly. I got like 4 other lights in my vehicle currently. The actual motor. So there's a motor from an XL9000. We can actually discuss this. So this is the actual motor assembly. There is a subsection which sits underneath this, which mounts to these 3 holes. That's what mounts the bar to the frame. If you actually look on this guy, this one doesn't have that. It actually just mounts straight down into the actual frame itself. On the XL9000 bars, there is a subsection which sits underneath, which is very similar to this, and actually sits and actually forces the, if you can see it kind of right here, where the belt loops around and makes contact. But here's a good example. There's your drive wheel again that actually pushes that spinning, if you want to call it the timing belt. The other thing that's worth noting on these is, like I said before, second version, you can kind of get a date on these bars by looking at what's written here on the motor. Right here, American Bosch, do not oil, blah, blah, blah. However, if you look, 12 volts, 6/4/1980, so June 4th, 1980. I believe these started coming out with this configuration sometime in late 79. I think it was 79, maybe 1980. That's when they did their transition to the XL9000 series bars. Other things worth noting, as I've got the plane traveling over me, the Par 36 seal beams themselves, they're different from what's used on the Federal bars. Now, I talked before about the GE 4416s and then the GE 4464s that were found on Fed Sig bars. These bars actually use the GE 7400, and the 7400 is slightly different from the 4416. The first thing you'll notice is that the lens itself, it is a spot bulb, but it's also fluted. So while it is a spot bulb, if you look at it, you can see it's actually kind of got a fluted lens to it. So it's not the same as a 4416. As you can see, there's the GE marking on the back of it. 7400s, I believe, are 35 watt bulbs. 35, I think, is the 7400. It's been a little while since I've looked that up. But since we've actually got one of these out, let's take a look at the assembly itself. If you look at the assembly here, I've got a bulb behind it, so it's actually worth noting. You can see where one's connected. You can see where the ground point is, and you can also see where the bulb actually makes contact for power. So here's your assembly. What is it? We're talking about this thing right here. You've got your power assembly here, so this is where your power comes in right here, and then the bulb actually grounds to the rest of the assembly via the one on the top. The other thing worth noting is if you look real close here, there's that par 36 notch that I talked before about on the Federal SIG bars. Notice the notch isn't here, here, or here, which means that when you put the bulb back in the bar, you're going to want to line that notch up. Again, we get the notch up here. Sorry guys, one hand and it's cold, so this is kind of numbing me at this point. Put this back up in here, line that up just right, close the lower gate, or close the gate, snaps into place, and boom, the bulb's back in where it belongs. Again, as you can see, here's it actually installed on the other side. You can clearly see here's your ground point here. So this is where the bulb grounds to the frame, and then you can see the hot, or the 12 volt positive, comes in down here off this thing and actually makes contact here. So one of the neat things that I've done in the past is I've actually modified, and I talked about this real briefly before, I've actually modified the 90-degree lamp holders and then the 180-degree lamp holders. I've taken these off just by drilling out the rivets, which can be found, there's 4 of them, here, 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 and here. Just drill them out, take the assembly off, put the assembly back in here, use the pop rivets, pop rivet back in place, and now I've got a 3-ring or a 3-lamp assembly. What's even neater is the fact that you can actually take a line, since obviously it's only set up for 2 bulbs, you can actually use the existing top or ground line to ground the bulb to the frame, but then run a jumper off of one of these guys, or off the bulb that's in one of this side or this side, to the 3rd bulb, and then you got 3 bulbs, and away you go. Now, there were many different versions of this bar, as I'm just talking about this one per se. There were additional features that could be found in this bar, including flashers, like standalone flashers, alley lights. There was even a neat feature on this bar called the Select Alert. Unfortunately, this is not a Select Alert bar. In general, how a Select Alert would work is that you would switch your control box to a certain point or apply power to a certain lead coming into the bar, and one of either the end lamps or these guys here would reach to a certain point and stop. And that would then stop and start flashing while the other lamps would go out. Or while this is spinning, or one of the other ones would spinning, when it reached a certain part of the bar, the bulb would disengage and the other bulb would spin, basically stopping the light from flashing in a certain direction. Or in some instances, just rotating to the alley light position, stopping, and basically lighting up for an alley light position. So some neat things that can be found in these bars. This point here, I'm looking at about 13 minutes, just shy of 13 minutes. Trying to think if there's anything else I can add here. I don't think so. I mean, the end caps are very similar to the Twinsonic end caps, where just like a Twinsonic, you've got the end caps here. These just unscrew and then this comes off. The domes mount in, and when the domes go on, the speaker assembly then just drops over them and you screw them in. I've covered the lamps. You guys got an idea how the motors look. Like I said, we talked about the dating of the motors. June 4th, 1980. These are very, very basic bars to work on. Even simpler, I think, than the Twinsonics are, because you don't have to deal with routing the chain from point A to point B, and everything's a little bit more up front and in your face, if that's the terminology you want to use. But that's about it. Hopefully this is beneficial to somebody. I just wanted to quickly talk about them, talk about this SD bar that I'm actually currently restoring. When it's all said and done, keep an eye on my channel, and you'll probably see the bar up here with some new domes. Have a good weekend, guys. Stampede Valkyrie out.